Hi, welcome back. You guys are funny as hell. Some of the comments that I've been reading have been cracking me up for sure. One of you was like, "Bro, I'm sorry, but you look like you give the best hugs." They're all yours, man. My hugs are yours. And one of and a couple of you want to be my gym bros. So if we're in the same area code, man, we'll figure it out. Absolutely. Now, one of you pointed out my Italianness, my Italianless Italianness, because I'm not Italian, but I did this a lot in my last video. So I pointed it out too, though. In my defense, I laughed about it. Okay, but anyway, we do have a review to talk about today, and it's actually part two of a review that I've already started. If you've been following, I've been reviewing Something Bad is Going to Happen, which in the last video I called Something Bad is About to Happen. Minding thing. If you have followed the first part of this review where I reviewed the first 4 episodes, you know that I was very fond of the first half of this show, and the first 2 episodes specifically, I think, are gold in terms of writing. I think the writing is really, really strong with this show. Like, fuck. Very strong, especially those 2 episodes. And it continues. But I talked about a shift at the end of episode 4. Now, I'm going to keep this as spoiler free as possible because I know there's some of you that have not seen it. But I impress upon you and I implore that if this premise of the show in any way seems kind of fucky to you and you're kind of intrigued, you should watch it because there's a lot here that works. For instance, after we kind of were left with that shift in narrative in the end of chapter 4, moving into chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8, we are now fully realizing the consequences of us figuring out exactly what it is that is plaguing this family and this wedding that everyone is so eagerly waiting to happen, and everybody wants this wedding to happen, and almost an obnoxious obsessive level, and sometimes even more so than the very groom and bride themselves. So after we've established what the story is in episode 4, what it is that is really happening, the show does shift into a different kind of genre in that we've explored all these different subgenres of horror, and I think maybe probably cumulatively all together we've probably explored roughly 3 to 4 different horror genres, small bits here and there from episodes 1 through 4. But in 4, when we finally establish what the tone actually is, we move into a very superstitious last 4 episodes. The extreme side of superstition, where you're dabbling into things that you shouldn't as a human being, say a Ouija board, the occult, books that are not for us to read, yet somehow we do anyway. And in this universe, clearly Evil Dead doesn't exist because we know very damn well from all of those installments, you don't read from a book that doesn't look like you should read from it. Throughout this episode, throughout these 4 episodes, what's really intriguing is that every character shifts along with the tone of the story now that we know what it is that is causing all this anxiety, which is still in the horror stream. It's still in the horror spectrum. We're not like going from like, we thought it was a horror and it's really a drama. There is quite a bit of drama here, which I was really surprised was interwoven so well into all the horror bits very meticulously. I mean, the writing on this fucking show just continues to excel. By the way, if you haven't seen part 1 of my review, I will probably link it at the bottom here so you guys can just kind of put 2 and 2 together. This is such a tightly written show that feels like there are no holes to fill. And it really is limited series. And now they could absolutely continue it, but I would implore them not to, because this finality, right? There's a finite sense to this story that is really hard to work for when you're writing something. And I genuinely was impressed just how fucky it was at the beginning and how complete it felt towards the end and simple in its execution. To get back on track, after you figure out what happens at the end of episode 4 and what's leading things, what's moving things forward and onward to this very dire and doomed state that we're all alluding to in the title, all the characters start shifting with the tone of the story. Characters that seem like they're against Rachel are suddenly becoming amicable, and they're becoming now partners of this endeavor, like trying to carry this burden with her. You find out that a lot of these characters are fucked up at the beginning of the show because of certain personal things, as most story arcs should, right? Where it's like, why is this character such a fucking asshole? And then you realize, oh, this is why. What's funny is that I didn't realize just how interconnected all these characters were to Rachel, even though this is the first time she's met them. I was really impressed to figure out and unfold the the weird sort of family trees that all connected them together and led them to this place that they're at now. I think that the writing in terms of character is really strong, because I was surprised every step of the way with a lot of the revelations here and a lot of the story arcs, why they are the way they are. I see I'm doing the Italian thing again. Fuck. This is what's interesting about the writing. At the beginning of the show, a lot of these characters have an armor that makes them seem asshole-ish or pieces of shit or just outright potential to be villainous, but they disarm them by the fourth by the second act, the second half of the show. They're all so completely disarmed, where now we're giving consensus and layers to why they are the way they are, and it fits because Rachel is studying to be a psychologist. So if anyone's going to unfuck these people, it's going to be her. She's going to be able to sit these people down and tell them, like, hey, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. There is definitely something wrong with you. Just something I know that we all wish we could do at the family table during Thanksgiving. The element of the horror here is really impressive because, like Hereditary, it weaves the horror into the emotional, which then enhances the supernatural elements of this because they're tied to the cynical roots of these characters, which just makes it, feel at home with reality. And that's the key, right? If you want to ground something in horror, you got to ground that horror in some kind of emotional root. I mean, a lot of cosmic narratives kind of start out that way. That is the root. And not that this is cosmic, but it works for cosmic for a reason, right? You tie the root of evil to a human emotion. Now it becomes bigger than life, yet somehow it's still intimate and small. And this does that really well, especially with what we're dealing with. When we figure out what is happening, every episode, especially episode 7, which was a standout episode for me, which absolutely took me by storm, like genuinely took me by storm, because it was between this episode 7 and episode 4. Those two episodes, funny enough, are highlights of the best form of writing for both halves. The stuff that happens in episode 7 is so ludicrous and so crazy, and it leans into the supernatural and uses the supernatural to enhance the stresses and the what ifs that come with marriage. And this is what's really really interesting to me. Like, on the surface, I'm not the kind of person that has an interest on watching something that has to do with, like, marriage. That's just not the rabbit hole I want to go down to when I watch, like, a film, uh because there's just so much that you can do with, like, a plot having to do with marriage. And they diversify the fuck out of this. They built this entire sense of omen around this ceremony, and there's so much that is completely dependent on the ceremony happening, that it's constantly filled with dread. And in 7, when we're finally sort of going into we need to figure this out before the wedding day, or before the wedding hour, because episode 7 takes place an hour before episode 8 in real time. It's kind of crazy because that's when she's at her most high gear, trying to figure out how to prevent this horrible thing that now she knows is going to happen from happening, both to her and to the people around her that she loves. And we go into high gear. Like, we go into high gear. This is a standout episode to me, in the same way that when people speak about a standout episode, like in Breaking Bad, right, where we have the Fly episode, right? We all know that episode is, like, so badass. It's simple, it's contained, but it's, like, perfect. This is one of those episodes that just feels so contained, and it feels perfect, and it feels like it feels unique. It feels like this episode is kind of defining the show in a lot of ways, narratively and aesthetically, and in terms of even camera. Like, this entire episode just feels like they're building up to something, and they do everything they can to keep you glued. And I think it's genius to put Episode 7 in real time, an hour before the actual ceremony, the actual wedding. So there's this tension that you're feeling with her, going like, you figure it out. You want her to figure it out, but you're also like, but hurry the fuck up because the wedding's in like a few minutes. But what they do to try to, the extremes that Rachel will go to try to keep this from happening are so fucking gnarly, dude. They're so gnarly. They're so fun, and it's so crazy, and it leans into witchcraft in a way that I did not expect. And the show's constantly doing fucky shit. Okay, the show is constantly doing fucky shit. It's like, hey, we're gonna do this episode, but we're gonna sneak in this element of ghosts in here, or a little bit of possession in here, or a little occulty in here, or a fucking Ouija board ceremony here. They even have a what feels like an ode to Evil Dead. And that's not spoiling much, but it's just in the camera movement. There is a camera movement that is so Sam Raimi, because it's like moving around through the woods, cutting through through the house and getting close to the ground and then crawling up the walls, and you're like, okay, someone loves Sam Raimi. We all love Sam Raimi, but this guy loves Sam Raimi. So does Lee Cronin, apparently. Even though we amplify the drama and the narrative points, it's in this last half where the horror elements interweave with the drama and the completion of the character arcs in such a way that it feels like, yes, sure, we've kind of lost the mystery now that we know what it is. But we've switched now the mystery. What is it? Because you can't keep an entire show up, you can't maintain an entire show with mystery. And that you can't tell me on episode fucking 7 what it is, and then on episode 8 find the solution. No. At some point, we have to figure out what this thing is. But what I like is that in episode 4, we find out. And the shift is now we've gone from mystery to immediacy. Now that we know what it is, there are still unknown elements of what this thing is that's happening. How are we going to combat it with no knowledge? How are we going to stop this from happening with no knowledge, no expertise? And it's just now, that's when it leans into the characters. Now we're exposing the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities. Now we're leaning into the horror, now that we're trying to very desperately find some kind of solution to stop this from happening. So we've shifted from the mystery to now the immediacy of the situation. Now we know what it is. The last episode, good God, we go hard as a motherfucker in giving you what you want, which is building up to this thing, this climax that people keep talking about throughout the entire show. And you feel the weight of the repercussions of everything that has been built up to this moment. And it's such a gothic, non-fairy tale that it just hit. It felt very dark. It felt very grim. It felt very, very, very gothic, very gothic, especially with some of the images later on that I don't want to spoil. Not only do the horror elements come to a head, but then also the character arcs. There is one scene with Rachel and her groom, and they're having a conversation that turns into an argument, and that argument is so well written because I recall people in my life and even myself having arguments just like this, where you go, you're the problem after, but only after you've agreed that you are problematic. I'm the problem and I'm sorry. And then they say something that triggers you. And then you go, you're the fucking problem. No, fuck you. Fuck you. And that it just escalates in such a way that is so organic, it's so real, and almost like improvised. It had to be improvised because the way that they act together in this scene was so emotional. And I mean, it's a good scene. It's a good like 15 minutes that they're arguing, but it's not just throwing words at the screen. Everything they say feels relevant to a real world relationship in such a way that it almost feels like a character study of us watching this. There is a very, what I think, a cautionary tale or an allegory about the obsession we have with trying to figure out who you belong to and the certainty of life, and how the only thing that's certain is death is going to touch every single one of us in a funny way, one way or another. We're all going to die. And there's this obsession that we have in ceremony, right? Whether it be marriage, whether it be a job, whether it be I have to find the right person because they have to fit this mold because I only have this much time to make something out of my life. I have to have a kid by this time. Like, this movie tackles that in sort of a very cautionary way, letting you know that you could do all the planning you want in your entire life, and at the end of the day, life only abides by the rules that were established far before you were created. has nothing to do with your expectations or what your preconceived notions are. Like, this show really hit an emotional beat with me that was so impactful, yet somehow horrific and just so fun to watch. This really wasn't what I expected it was going to be. It's a intimate, dark, very humorous. It's at times very dark humor, but it's a dark, intimate story about the tragedy of doom love and how we all are victims to it at one point or another in our lives. And how it shouldn't handicap us, and it was just kind of a deep message for such a darkly fun show. And once again, horror proves that yes, you can make a drama all you fucking want, and you can make a comedy all you want about the absurdity of life, and a drama about the stresses of life. But horror is just such a pitch perfect place to explore themes this heavy, this dark, because not only can they get allegorical, they can get metaphorical, they can get literal, they can become all those things at once. They can be layered one on top of the other. They can be explored in ways that give you a catharsis of understanding that I just don't feel any genre gets, which is why horror reigns supreme in my heart forever and always. I do. If this sounds enticing to you on any capacity, I do suggest and recommend that you watch it because I had a shitload of fun watching it, and I've already told other people to watch it, and they've watched it and are very happy with it. So I know it's a little late. I know by now if you wanted to watch it, you already have. But for those who haven't, it has my recommendation, very much so. Anyway, that is tonight's review. Tomorrow I'll come with a film that hopefully you guys will enjoy. And that's it. Keep the comments going, man. They're cracking me up. Anyway, as always, I'll see you guys at the movies.